Hi, and welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, and I am so glad to be here today. We are talking about how brands can cultivate community. And this is an interesting topic for me because we have this dichotomy in the world of only people can make relationships with people, yet we have multinational corporations and large organizations and small and medium organizations that are effectively using their brand to create connections with people. So, why the dichotomy when we know it can happen? Well, we don't know how, or we think we know, or we think the way in is one certain way. And we are here to break down those barriers, to expel the old way of thinking, and listen to what Kelly is going to be sharing with us in the conversation that we're having today about building communities and using that from a brand perspective. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kelly before we meet her. So you're going to hear me say hello to her. We will go to the open and then we will be back and you will get to meet Kelly Hungerford in person, in the flesh again, because we like her on the Voice of Bold Business Radio. And she's coming back for the second time today. So, Kelly is a customer centric marketing operations specialist. She is also a social business strategist based in Switzerland. Her experience spans 20 years of European sales and marketing, product development, and customer care for Fortune 500 companies, high growth startups, both in B2B and B2C markets. And she works hands on with senior management and teams to implement no nonsense digital content, social media strategies that achieve business goals. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Welcome, Kelly. How's it going this evening? Because for you, it's evening.
It is evening. Hi, Jess. Thanks for having me back. It is going great. That was just like the most energizing opening.
Yes, so, that's what we strive for.
Yeah. So I'm here in Switzerland, and I just noticed that in all good broadcasting best practices, you have some light in back of you, but it's nighttime here. I didn't account for that. So apologies. Not trying to leave anyone in the dark. It's just, oops.
You know what? It's mood lighting. We've got to get people in the mood. There's an element of mysteriousness that we are going to dispel today.
I love it. Mood lighting, literally.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, okay. So now I have to ask you, do you get to see, I don't know if you do you get to see the lunar eclipse tonight / tomorrow morning?
Oh, you know what? It's a good question. I don't know.
I don't know because I'm going to wake up at like 5 to see it here. Well, that's when I normally wake up. So I'm going to look out the window. Let me just be honest. It's not anything unusual, but I think I will be able to see it out one of my windows and go outside and see at least part of it before it goes below our mountains. So we'll have to see.
I'm going to have to check that out. As soon as I'm done, as soon as our conversation's over, I am sticking
on that. This moon, I like the moon, and it's maybe because it's semi-close to us, but still celestial. That's the word I'm looking for. And I actually think there's a relationship with this, what I like about the moon and what people think they like about communities and building communities around brands. It seems a little far away and very exciting. And we know somebody's done it, but we don't know how to do it.
Got to take that first step.
That first step. What is the first step, Kelly?
Yeah, the first step, I think the first step is really purpose. And I've seen this over and over. And I think anytime that we're trying to relate to people and go out, start conversations, you kind of always have a purpose, right? I mean, it might be far-fetched, sitting in an airport or waiting for a train. But the minute you start to engage with someone, you know what that purpose is. It's either to, shoot a little bit of time for 5 minutes while you wait, or maybe get more of the digs on the shoes that person has on, or understand where you're going, but you engage with purpose. And I think that's probably one of the first stumbling blocks that a brand often puts in between themselves and their community is, what's the purpose? They get out there right away and they're like, we need to engage, right? We hear everyone's doing it. We need to build community. And it's just like, why? What's your why? Why are you there? And what's your purpose? So I think that's really the fundamental, the very first place to start. And I find in working in operations and optimization, that just carries you so far. Just always be asking why and what's the purpose of what we're doing. It's just kind of built in, and it works really well for those foundational steps, and trying to understand, what does community mean and why do you want to bring people together? There must be a purpose for both sides.
Okay, so let's start with what community is not. So here, and you brought up shoes, which of course is something else I completely and utterly love. So this past weekend, I had 2 events happening. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I was out of the house, dressed, loving every second of it. And one of the things, and I'm going to tell you a little secret, and one of the little things that I always struggle with is I have no problem saying hello. I have no problem smiling and making eye contact. I have a problem figuring out what to talk about. And I like shoes, so I talk about shoes, or I like tea and I talk about tea. I have a 50-50 chance that the person I start a conversation with also, in some tiny capacity, has that thing. So how do you start? I mean, we're going to start people to people conversations and then move into this concept, because brands aren't going to be walking around asking you what you like about your shoes. But we have to understand a little bit of how do we start a relationship? How do we open that door to engagement? And then be able to say, so how does a brand do that?
Right. So I think that's a great point. And I think the beginning, again, it starts with that why, and it starts with understanding. I think community builders and brands or businesses or people with intent who really want to engage in these relationships for the long term, and partner with end users or customers or client, whatever you term that person you're going to be connecting with, there's a purpose, and there's a lot of listening that goes in. So when you go and you say, okay, maybe I can, hit the mark by talking about shoes or tea, you've probably done a little bit of research ahead of time, knowing that, I can ask someone about shoes and I have 50% of likelihood that they like tea. If they don't, they like coffee, right? So you've kind of done a little bit of research ahead of time. And I think that that's where it begins, of understanding, after like the why you want to be engaging with people, you need to understand what's important to them. You need to be listening to them. And today it's so much easier than it was 20 years ago to listen, because we can all grow these enormous social ears, right, through social listening. And you have a lot of opportunities to really, be it an industry or be it competition or your end users, you have this vast opportunity just to drop in and listen. Be a good listener. You don't have to say a word. And I think that the beginning is listening, and then kind of dropping in and being a part of the conversation. We like to say lurking on social media. Lurk, listen, learn, and then you can start to engage and pop in. You'll see where people are, where they're hanging out, what they're talking about, what's important to them, because I think that's the most important. We as businesses or brands and people, we all have a message we want to get out. We're really excited to tell people about it, but it might not be exactly what the receiver wants to hear. So you have to understand kind of what kind of messages are they looking for, and how do you fit into their life. And so I think listening is a big part, and there's just absolutely no reason today why a brand can't be listening. I don't believe that it belongs to the marketing department, social media. I think it belongs distributed across the organization. And there are so many different opportunities for brands to build community, or let's even say relationships, depending on what that purpose and those goals are. There really should be now, today, in today's age, listening stations in every department of an organization, to really understand what the people who love you most or who are interested in you most, what they're talking about, so you can start that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to give you another little secret. And that is,
you eavesdrop.
I do.
That's
exactly what I'm going to say. I listen before I join a conversation, because one, I like shoes and I like tea. when I engage with somebody for the first time, I'm not interested in me and I don't want to force myself on somebody. You said something incredibly important. What's important to them? What is important to that person that you're reaching out to? And if you don't know, you might as well eavesdrop. That's what you're doing when you lurk online. Listen in. And sometimes they're telling a joke or they're telling a story or they say something, and I can actually easily join in with a slight question on my face or an actual question that I can verbalize or a giggle or a chortle. And you now become part of the group. And it's easy to do when we start from listening.
Absolutely. Yeah. No,
And
I agree. I think that, and depending on where you are, and a lot of times teams say, but we don't do social media. That belongs to marketing. It's like, you know what? TweetDeck doesn't belong to marketing. It belongs to anyone who wants to set up an account. Really, I mean, invest that $5.99 or whatever it is now for Hootsuite. I don't know because I've used them for so long. I have grandfathered in at some really old, low price. Yay! Yeah. And you know what? Set it up. Listen to keywords. Let's just start lurking. Be a voyeur. And it's fascinating. And I think that and I've seen that when I talk to teams and I say, just go out, set up a Twitter account. You don't have to tweet if it's not your thing, but just set up listening columns, set up your columns and just start listening. And then in 2 weeks, let's talk again and tell me what you've learned about, that topic or that industry. You can make lists. It's incredible. People are absolutely gobsmacked that they didn't start this months ago, just as this really is food for conversation to take back to their team, to be able to participate in a more well-rounded way about, what could that community strategy look like? How could we use the voice of the customer to help shape services? It's really an eye-opening experience, and it's not a given for everybody, especially people who just haven't. If you're talking to traditional marketers, or if you're talking to product developers or R&D who have just been working in a more traditional space, and maybe their company hasn't really embraced or created a listening center. It's pretty powerful. It's free for the most part, and they take back a lot of insights. So I think it's and you're right. It's all about them. There is no I in that community. It's all about the we.
And right now we're talking about them. We're just talking about a different them than they would be thinking about and listening to. We're talking about the them across an organization. So all of you that are joining us in this conversation, now Kelly and I have a secret for you. And she's already said it. We're just repeating it. And that is, it doesn't matter the department. It doesn't matter the level. It matters that you know what's going on in the marketplace. One of the things that makes us unique and promotable, approachable, ability to increase our problem-solving skills and be called upon to think thoughtfully about things and add to conversations is the ability to gather information. And that's what Kelly's talking about. What are customers saying? It doesn't matter if you're in accounting. It doesn't matter if you're in customer service where they like to use social media. It doesn't matter if you're in traditional marketing or TV advertising parts of marketing or sales. It's the best way to learn because that's where the ideas will come from. The data that we have from the job that we do, plus what other people are talking about. And that's the place we can have a brainstorm party all by ourselves.
Oh, yeah. And I think what's really interesting too is, a lot of times there are town halls or often companies, colleagues get together in the cafeteria and they're talking and everyone kind of sits in groups, right? Like your accounting, you sit together, maybe your R&D, you sit together, maybe you're in compliance or whatever it might be, marketing. And those conversations kind of happen there. And then what's pretty cool is when someone from accounting can actually say, oh yeah, you know what? I saw that there was a problem with one of our products. And it's like, really? Where'd you see that? Oh, and does this happen before? Yeah, I saw a conversation happening on Twitter. Really? And then marketing's like, what? And then everyone's like, boom. And it's like, yeah, and it kind of made me start to think because at the end of the day, they start thinking about, wow, this processes are all linked within the organization, right?
Yep.
Sooner or later, even if it seems abstract, one department starts to domino into the next. And the more all of the departments are on board with what's happening, could be product problem, or it could be, ideation, what have you, it starts to not only give you those insights to complete a process or better your marketing or your customer care or what have you. But it starts to really build that bond within the organization too. So the social listening, while we think of it as hey, let's listen to understand how we can better market, because that's what everyone thinks about still about community building. Like, we want to build this community, but really we want to pass on our messages. But there's so much more to that in this whole listening and understanding to bring back knowledge to the table to talk about what's happening is this incredible bonding and community building experience within the organization to bond around the customer or the end user. And it's something or what's happening in the industry. And it's an aspect that I think community builders often overlook because it's very external facing. So let's build that community, that outer community, that external community, but it's so powerful. It's such a powerful tool within the organization.
And I love that you're saying that. And what strikes me the most is that there could be self-organizing cross-functional teams happening here, is what I am, as I'm listening to you, that is coming up.
Absolutely.
And when that organization happens, when those conversations are happening, you're right, whether it's a town hall, whether it's some sort of a process, whether it's a particular type of meeting that you go to where you get to share these ideas and talk about it, how neat that you get to have this connection with other people that you work with that you've also already talked to. And now whoever's listening and watching, they're like, oh, we have less work to do. Oh, they've already been talking to each other. Oh, this is already fleshed out. How great.
Community and with that building that relationship, because when internally you collaborate, then you have a better chance of really being able to answer questions. Let's say if you're working, I've used community building. Well, let's say this: social customer service is a great example of a really value added proposition to build community. You start out with this purpose of we need to help people, right? But in order to be able to really help an end user or a customer solve a problem, often the person who is the engager on social channels, they don't have all the answers. So you need to have this really tight collaboration network inside. So it's either a repository, some kind of database or FAQ that people are keeping up and populating, or it's get a question, find the answer internally, turn it back around as quickly as possible and document that. So for next time, and you can only do that if you have really strong collaboration. And when I was at Paperly, I worked on all customer facing operations. So I was kind of the only, in the beginning, the only non-technical hire. So social channels were really important communication channels to me, and they were communication channels, not marketing channels. And what I saw right away is I could not at all best serve individuals to help them unless I had the team behind me, unless they had my back. And then those individual one-on-one conversations actually turned into small communities of people who had maybe like-minded problems. Service wasn't working, or they had questions, or they wanted to, give praise, but they would all come together, and it was this back and forth. But I was just the conduit. The information was traveling back and forth to this team, who was then the information was kind of disseminated, and then they would come together and have an answer or have a response for maybe one individual or for an entire community. So it was really interesting. But when I think back, the collaboration was key, and building that was a lot of education. It was also, again, a lot of putting our end users at that point in front of the entire team. And it was on a really large, big screen monitor saying, this is what's happening. Can you guys help me? We need to build this conversation. And what looks like conversation with individuals actually turns into communities, because they're sharing all of these answers and this knowledge. And so that's kind of the beauty of community building on social networks. You find so quickly those magnets that come in. People are attracting like-minded people for problems, or whatever it might be, interests. But the collaboration internally was key to helping build a strong link with a community, or the beginnings of a community externally.
Interesting. And
that was long-winded. Sorry.
no, it's perfect because there's so much in there to unpack. And every time you'd say something, I lost the thing before it, which just means you're just digging deeper before I even open my mouth, Kelly.
I get so excited about it. There's something so passionate about it.
Right. Yeah. And what I love about what I'm hearing you say is that there's an organization that is there that when we are able to, we don't have to conceptualize it. We just have to discover it. And once we understand the ebbs and the flows of how information is flowing, what problems people are coming together to solve, and then they're going about their way, and how that dance is very interesting to me, because what I hear you saying is it is everybody. And being a non-technical person on a technical team gives an added level of perception, yet it also brings a challenge, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because you're really the communicator. And I think what's interesting, so out of that, where it started, I was always running back to a team saying, oh, it was usually bug related, or we have a feature that's not working, or what have you. And the Paperly users, they really love, and they still do, they love their Paperlys. They count on those daily roundups because that's where they're aggregating their content from, and they're using those newsletters and what have you. And it was really interesting, where usually there's a disconnection between technical teams and very often the business side. So it could be the communication side, it could be marketing, it could be customer care, but there is still this divide. And what was really great about kind of using this social layer, kind of this mirror to the world, was being able to say, hey, listen, I'm willing to be your legs, and I'm kind of like the social rover. I'm going back and forth, and I'm that conduit between our customers and the problems that they're having, and you're fixing them. And in between that, I was really building this relationship, building up so much goodwill within the organization. And I think all organizations experience the person who's making the link and relaying the conversation and building that community. They end up building these really strong bonds internally. And again, it's that internal community that at some point I walked in, and our technical team, I didn't even have to say anything in the morning. They're like, we're on it. We see that bug. We're going to help you out. Jane, you know what? You can tell her the deploy will go out at 2:00 today. I mean, that was awesome. And that was a turnaround from a total disconnect of this big, long process to submit a bug. And it was all through just like opening this window so they could see, and it bringing them closer without, I think, the involvement of the technical team doesn't necessarily want to be engaging, or they, in some cases, shouldn't be engaging. It's not their job to engage with the end user. But having that window to the world, it really changed things. And I think that's just something, again, social media is usually, if we just take the case of social media, it sits in the marketing department, maybe the communications department, but no other departments. And it's a shame. I think it's just a lost opportunity in so many different ways. So companies should just be, people, go out and take control of your own destiny. Lurk, listen. No, it's powerful. Yeah.
Okay. My brain is still going from what you were just saying. Where the gap, let's go to the gap between the technical side and the non-technical side, that even though we seem to have gotten rid of, in general, there's bridges or ladders or trampolines between different departments to allow communication to happen in some level. That gap that you were describing, I also see on a regular basis. It's this technology is a necessary evil. Well, even when you're a technology company, there's this element of how the operation side of things goes, well, this is a necessary evil. And I walk into an organization and I'm like, how can it be a necessary evil? It's what you do. Part one. And I think it comes down to fear. Have you experienced that when you're working with marketing people and technical people? Because you said it very well. Technical people don't need to be on the front lines interfacing with clients. Yet being able to see streamlines allows communication to occur. Internal community is happening, which means externally people are watching also. We're lurking to see what's going on to best serve what is important to the people we're trying to talk to. They're watching us. And how are we showing up as an organization? And when you've got that fear piece in there, I think that internal rift does display externally. And we get these, well, we've got horror, everybody's got a horror story of where they went and had and complained at some capacity or some level on social media to try and get something. And then of course you have risk management that comes in and says, well, here's got to get them offline as fast as possible and into email or into direct messages. But what's the percentage of solutions that are actually coming from that? Or are they just getting, are they just getting the same old, that direction and it stops? There's this fear, right? Do you see what I'm saying? And instead of embracing it, and I think we really need to talk about that, because all of us are going to get complaints about something we're doing. We aren't wearing the right, we'll go back to shoes. We aren't drinking the right thing. We didn't curl our hair right today. Whatever and that's personally. And then as a business, you didn't respond to me fast enough. I can't believe you didn't think about this thing. Why isn't this a priority to you? Because it's so important to me, right? At a business level. So we've got all this stuff that might be happening as well. And fear plays a big part. How do we do that?
Yeah, it's a big one. So there are a few different aspects, right? So the industry that you're in, some industries are just maybe less fearful in some ways. I would say the technology industries are probably, I think, well, technology and consumer like lifestyle, they seem to embrace connections with community and people, building community, connections with individuals. They're really comfortable with that one-on-one or building communities. There are tech communities. They can be like hyper geeky, or it could be technology around the maker movement. ST Microelectronics is working on building community for makers. Super cool. They power all of these different areas. It hasn't always been a strategy for them to go to the end user because they really sell B2B, but they really want that relationship. So they're starting to embrace that. And I think what the first step internally, depending on the industry, like if you're a tech startup, it's much easier. But if you're a larger organization, it's that buy-in and it's that purpose. Like why are we going to do this? And when companies get so big where you're working across geographies, or you have all of these different departments and maybe like this super complicated matrix, it's really difficult because you're kind of tapping into people's time, right? So you have to be really, depending on the size and the structure, you have to think about, it's always about the benefit. Like what's the value add on, and how much value does that add, not only to the end user or the consumer, but us internally, if we were able to work in a better way. And when we strengthen and we get rid of that fear internally about communicating and about understanding better somebody else's role within the organization, then those barriers and those silos start to break. And then we can kind of say, hey, now we can work for the better of this community or this group of people or this customer base or this client, depending on who it is. But it's understanding, it's getting all of the parties to kind of like shake their head like, oh yeah, I get it. That would help everybody. And that buy-in process can actually take quite a long time, depending on the size of the company. One way to get around that is just to start a little pilot, like a really small pilot. And I've done that successfully with other organizations where they've just said, we have no idea how to, going to hit our head against the wall. Like, how do we break through? And I just said, start a pilot. If you have someone who, if you have the authority within your department to give someone the go ahead, or if you're in a department and you're like, oh, my manager's never going to say yes to this, but I'm sure if I could prove it, that will make breakthrough, have a side project. Like just, put in that extra elbow grease and figure out a way to pilot, to prove your point, this small, like mini proof of concept. And that works really well in getting that buy-in. And I think it's about people understanding that maybe working together or being more transparent to customers or end users doesn't mean any more work on their end. Actually, you'll work more efficiently. And it kind of takes some time to figure out, how can I communicate that? Because I see that's the biggest fear factor. People are just like, don't have me talking or communicating or working differently because it's just going to impact my time and my work. And I'm limited on what I can do. And so I think part of the fear is there. But there are tools that are really helpful. So I mean, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but if we're talking about like how to break down that fear factor and bring in transparency, I think just about every large corporation and even smaller businesses, many of them, they use Microsoft products, right? So we just rolled out for a client that I have really working with Microsoft Teams, and it's an incredible tool that comes free with Office 365.
Mhm.
Incredible. It's like a mix of Slack and Trello and Evernote and everything all at one. Invite people to it, completely transparent about what you're doing. Amazing way to make those inroads of like buy-in on what you're doing. And it's not a new tool to introduce because they're already accustomed to using Microsoft. So I think I have to actually say, in terms of internal community building, to get that buy-in for more strategic projects and transparency, like hat off to Microsoft for kind of fixing that up. A year ago, it was a bit of a doggy tool, and now I think it rocks. It's awesome.
You are listening to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. This is program 121. That's 121. And we are talking about how brands can cultivate community. Kelly Hungerford has been sharing all of her knowledge and pouring it out into us. We were just talking about fear. One of the things that came up for me around that was this concept of relationship. Even though you were talking about somebody who and organizations, even though they are B2B, they're trying to figure out how to have more relationship. I like that because it's like we've gone this other direction where when e-commerce first came out and technology first started coming online, and then you had things like Facebook and Twitter and all these companies that started, and that was back in the 90s. Hello, isn't that crazy? That was like 20 years ago, and we're still figuring out how to do this.
We're still figuring it out.
Because so these technologies were made, yes, to bring people together, not to bring people together physically. And so there was this element and this push and this thought of, I can be, what you had said it before too, also, Kelly, I can be more efficient. And now that I'm efficient, don't change what I'm doing, or only bring me new technologies that are going to make this more efficient. I'm not sure I want to talk to more people in a day, because conversations take time. They take effort. Some people crave that. Some people run away from that. And that's actually, part of the fear, I think, comes from that too, is I have the way that I work. I have the way I want to communicate. I, for whatever reason, don't really feel good about this whole conversation of having a conversation. So what do I do with that? And I love that you were talking about side projects also just now, because it gives us the opportunity, you're right, to have a proven pathway that comes with just a little bit of time here and there, all this effort to show, because in the end, we're in a time where we can barf out ideas all day long. Until we have something to back it up, to show that it's going to work and that it's been thought through, a side project is the perfect way to do that.
I think so. And if you're looking at those side projects, look for the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Like, what do you know? I mean, there are a lot of projects you could take on because you love them or what have you, but find something small and think in terms of like weeks, not months. So in technology, I come from a technology background and really have watched that whole transition from waterfall development to agile, and in clients, we really try to move everything with the clients I'm working with on the projects from these long timelines that are like 3 months down the road, we're going to see something, and you're like, like, how can management buy into that? I mean, that just seems like forever, right? So try to move it to sprints, to shorter working times of no more than 3 weeks at a time. And if you think about it, if you have an idea, think, what can you do in 3 weeks? Like, and you can chunk that out. Like, maybe the first week is kind of the discovery. The second week is, setting up, and make a little plan, but do it in 3-week chunks. So you have these achievable milestones, and then you can also start to prove within that point of, here's how I modeled this over 12 weeks, and I cut it down in these work packets, or you can call it sprints, what they are. And it's pretty impressive, because you can then say, within a short amount of time, I can actually prove what I'm doing. And that side project also doesn't seem so unbearable and unimaginable, because it is people's time at the end of the day. But I think that they have been really successful for me and helping teams who think they're never going to get the buy-in, it's kind of like the sneaky way in. It's like, in a way, it's kind of cheating, right? And it works really well because then when you're in that conversation of like, God, wouldn't it be great if we had, and everyone's like, well, that'll take way too long. And you're like, oh, you know what? Actually, I've kind of been running this project on the side and I just wanted to show, can I take 5 minutes to present, and then they're just like, oh, and without extra budget, without extra being really scrappy with the tools that you have, pretty impressive.
It is very impressive. And okay, just so everybody understands what just happened, Kelly not only broke down the process. She even said, here's what you do it in 3 weeks. Here's what you're going to do each of those weeks. And then when the time is right, you've got results to show and how to say it and ask for permission. And now you have everything you need to take that next step and start looking for that communication to buy in. Kelly, this concept that you're on the agile side, right? And moving things and iterating and running in sprints is interesting. And I'm focusing in on the words that you're using and how you're describing this from the communication side of things, not just communications out of a company, but the human communication element of what's going on. And I wrote in my notes, time, value, benefit, connection. And I don't remember why I wrote it down. I'm just frantically writing down notes as we're speaking.
Why not? Sounds good. Right. No,
and the thing is, though, what does this do? When we do something that adds value to our clients, to our consumers, we're doing great. When we do something that adds value, we're basically building credibility in an outward facing way, even though we might be a nameless person in a bigger team. Internally, when we're doing those same things, we get credibility and we're seen as the person that somebody could come to and ask us a question because we know how to think. We're thinking about solving problems. We're looking at what would be easy to change. We're looking at what we can add to what we're doing with the least amount of time and show improvement and opportunity when the time is right. We become that person that somebody can come to, and that's very helpful. And so knowing these, and we're just talking about listening. We're talking about listening and taking baby steps. And it reminds me of a conversation. Here's where we were going. It reminds me of a conversation that I was having just yesterday, in fact, speaking to a woman, and she works in a retail organization and is a watcher. And she's watching what's coming through the cash register at any point in time during the day. And then she was moved to someplace else in the store. And she noticed that there was not very much of the thing that people were buying most on the shelf. So she told somebody about it because she didn't know what to do. She hadn't been trained in that, but she told somebody, you know what she got? Don't worry about it. It's not your job. Don't worry about it. It's not your job. And in that case, there's two reactions that we can have as a person. We feel devalued. We feel like, whoa, we're supposed to be part of this team. The other part is, oh, okay, I get that it's not my job. I also get this is a problem. Maybe I could go talk to the people who can get this stuff on the shelf. Maybe I can do that. And, there's a little bit of, there's fear around that too, isn't there? There's that unconscious, if you go do that, am I going to be seen as going around? Am I going to be seen as doing these other, whatever this might be, whatever I don't know the politics of it, but there's obviously politics. And so
that's frightening, right? When
it is frightening, and it still happens. And so when you're talking about all of the, the side projects and being able to show up, that works in some scenarios, and some scenarios you get something like this. And it can happen in a tech company. It can happen in a service company. It can happen in a retail company. It can happen in a manufacturing company. Yeah. And when have you ever faced that?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
and how did you handle it? How did you deal?
Yeah, it's really difficult because, that happened. One time I quit. It's like, you know what? So you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run.
One of my favorite songs.
Right. So I grew up on country music with my dad, and that song applies to everything. And you know what? At some point in some jobs, you're just like, you know, and I'm someone who just can't. I try every opportunity, every way, like, how can we get this point? How can we make this a win for everyone? Mostly for our customers or our end users, the people who are paying for our services, right? And so a lot of times politics get in the way, and sometimes indeed, you know, it just gets enough where you're like, nothing's ever going to change here. I'm walking because it's not worth it. But most of the time, I think it's a matter of finding finding that value proposition internally. You have to know what makes your team tick or what makes the management tick, and sometimes it's really, again, it goes back to that listening and observing and understanding. Okay, you know what are the team dynamics and how do I work around that? And it just takes a long time, but I think that there's always a way to kind of devise that plan of showing what's that win-win. You know, if we talk about time, value, benefit, and connection, you know, what's the time I need to get this job done? What's the value it's going to bring both parties? What's the benefit? What's in it for me? People always want to know at the end of the day, and this goes to building external communities. You can't go out and start asking people that you don't have strong relationships with to do something for you, because it's always going to be what's in it for me. You've got to give, 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 give. And then at some point you'll get, and you just keep on giving and giving and giving. And that's what it's all about when it comes to community building. And that's the same thing internally. When you want something and you want to kind of break through that noise or break down those barriers internally, or like get through to that person who's like, whoa, nothing to see here. Don't bother me with your stuff because it's going to impact my job. You've got to know what's in it for them. Right? So what is that value? And then I think if you know the amount of time that you're going to take, what the benefit is, what the value is, you can build that connection. And then you can start making some progress. So there is no like one, do this, and it all depends. It's all like fuzzy feeling. Like that's how people are, right?
Yes.
And that's I kind of like to think of, and that's where I think technology is great if it can help us be more efficient in places. That doesn't mean that we should keep on slamming on more work. It means that we should take that extra time and invest it in the relationships that we want to build with the people who are important to us internally, our colleagues, stakeholders, and also externally. And that's where technology can really help us out. Not to pack our days or pack someone with more work, but to make time to be human. You know, that human to human touch that Brian Kramer loves to talk about. You know, it's not just about being human, but it's also about how can we use that time to connect. And I think it's true. People have the best intentions. They see like, oh, there's no product on that shelf, and when you get like, whoa, not my job, you have to understand the dynamic better. When someone pushes back on doing good, it's like, whoa, okay, you gotta step back and take the time to figure that out.
Right.
It's annoying. I think it's just annoying because I'm always like, it's all for the good, you know, like we can sell more product, we can do this, but there's some backstory that we totally don't know about.
Exactly. We are out of the loop on that one.
Oh yeah. But
I find it interesting too. You're talking about giving, and there's giving, and then there's giving. And most people give knowing that at some point they are supposed to get. The thing is, those people, the ones that expect to get instead of just intuitively knowing at the right time or the right ask is made, because it's not just because we give doesn't mean somebody's going to step up and give back. We may have to ask to get the give.
That's a great point, Jess. And I think when it comes to building community, there's something that just along with that whole formula, giving isn't enough. And that goes back to the value proposition and the purpose, the why. You have to also know when to ask. It's not a one-sided thing. You know, I know people who've given and given and given, and they get really frustrated because the community's not growing, it's not fostering, but there's no call to action for people.
Right.
And I think when you're building communities, they come around interest, whatever that interest might be, you know, technology problem, I love shoes, diabetes, run for life, you know, whatever it might be. People want that call to action because when you belong, it's your giving and taking. So I expect like, I'm going to be part of something bigger. And within that, I'm going to be asked, I'm going to be challenged with something and tasked with something. And just that constant giving, it doesn't work. I do believe that the people who wholeheartedly give, they will receive, and they're not looking for anything in return. But when you're doing this for a business and a brand, of course, there is something that you want in return. It might be feedback, it might be bug testing, it might be help us co-create content. I mean, it can be a very fun and collaborative give get, but that call to action has to be there. It's not just, and I think that we run the danger of, if we give too much and expect people just to know what to do to give back, they're not going to. There has to be that value exchange.
And it breeds resentment. We
It
can
does.
tell
When
when
you
we're
like
giving
me,
too much.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like when you're home and you're in the kitchen and you see dishes sitting around and you're like, duh, doesn't anyone know that those dishes belong in the dishwasher, right? But it's like, my family will just say, yeah, but why didn't you just ask us to put them there? Like, why do you expect? And I'm just like, well, because they're sitting on the side of the sink. Okay, not exactly the same, but in a way it is. We have a voice, we can use it.
It is,
right?
We can use it. It is a perfect example because there's an assumption there. And as soon as there's an assumption and we're expecting people to join the party between our ears and they don't, we feel left out.
Assumptions.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And that resentment piece. And I'd like to stick there for just a second, because we have to recognize, if we start having bad feelings about what we're giving, we are not giving to give. We are giving with the expectation somebody will turn around and give to us. And maybe they are, and we don't see it. But because we're expecting it, and now we have expectations, because we're expecting it a certain way, we don't see it. It's the quickest way to have a communication breakdown. And in my opinion, anybody out there with a community that is not working the way they want, check motive.
Yeah, and the other thing is check your management and make sure that your expectations. So if you have this plan to develop this long-term strategic relationship, because that's what it is. It's a commitment to people. It's a commitment to building something together with the people who love you most at that time. And community, it evolves. So you'll have some diehards that stay with you forever, and you'll have people come and go because there are, friends for seasons, friends for reasons, and community is the same thing. But I think that the first and foremost, the killer is the expectations when you sell this to the stakeholders and to your management. This could be like the CEO of your startup, or it could be, up to board level or whomever you need for this massive budget if you're a large enterprise. It's the expectation of what's the return. And the return, community is not followers on LinkedIn. It is not, followers on Twitter or likes on a page. And community isn't a marketing campaign. It's not a blast. It's always on. And I think the expectation needs to be set that, it's going to take time to foster. You're going to spend 6 months of just giving and engaging and be out there until you start to see some kind of return. What is that return? It might not be conversion. It might be conversation. It might be ideation. It might be feedback to better a process. And those, whichever type of community you're building internally within the organization or externally, brand community, you really need to have that laid out in that initial document. It doesn't have to be this thick, but there needs to be a plan of what that give and take is, and what the expectations are, and how the company or the team is going to benefit from it. Because I think that's exactly it. It's like, nothing's happening. We've given and nothing's happened. It's like, yeah, but what were the expectations, right? And the community has to understand, what are they getting out of it, right? So you kind of have this checklist, and there are some great services and resources out there helping people, like Feverbee, CMX, Community Roundtable, to get people started. Community Canvas, Google Community Canvas, and you come to a website. Amazing foundations to get you going that really help set that. And it's that expectation setting is so important.
It is. I need to get down in the nitty gritty, because I know there are people watching and going, but I want the return. I want the give back. And maybe you need to learn from everything. So I would suggest taking a pause and doing that. However, I know people want to know from somebody like you who is an authority on this subject and building communities, this concept around what Facebook is doing with publishers of content and reducing them from the feeds. I
Yes.
want the skinny from you, Kelly.
Okay. I think, this is great. So first of all, it's just, okay. So there are a couple of things. One, we should never forget that when we're on these platforms at any given time, we don't own them. Anything can change and we can't boohoo about it. We should have been building our audience and pointing them all the time back to our own website and our blog, because there's nothing like owning your own home. You can always be kicked out of the one you rent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, I think the companies who have been really building relationships and engaging, not being that digital billboard, not using social channels as another marketing channel and advertising channel, I don't really think they have a lot to risk. I think they know who the people are who love them most. They're having daily conversations. And I think if anything, what we've learned from Facebook and what brands and companies are going to focus more on is start putting the money where I think people and companies should have put a lot more of it in the beginning. And that's the community management. So the people over paid media. Because what we're seeing is you can put money, you can throw media behind some types of things, but those days are over of like just free advertising. So I think you really need to be earning that love. And that's what these changes in Facebook are forcing people, companies to do. And there is just some great, if I just take communities on Facebook of companies, or here's two different types of companies. One, I love, there's a company called Reset You, and all they work is on how to get people in shape and lose weight. Amazing community. If you want to see how a company who's selling a service can bring on board new members, check them out. I mean, sure, they sponsor a post here and there, but they're working on selling their services through community. They've been hitting this hard the last year or longer. It's all about the relationship. Another one who's doing great, I think Brian Kramer's doing a great job with the Human Marketing Hub. Not sure I love that name, but it's like not saying it, but it's the H2H Hub, let's call it that. He's doing a marvelous job of building community. And through that community, he also sells services. I don't think anybody cares because they get so much value. Is he worried about his reach? No way. He has 1,600 members, I think, of that community now. He's got this small army going out sharing the love. And I think that's where brands want to be. And that's something that when the paid is taken away, or that featured spot in someone's timeline, oh shoot, what am I going to do now? Well, it's what you should have been doing the whole time, out there building relationships. Yeah, that's it. Go out.
This is the place. Should matters.
It's the way to hit that organic. And I've always worked more on the organic side of social media. I'm not a paid person, and I love I love proving the point of, if you work with people and if you put your money into the community managers, the amount of money people pay for paid media, they could have invested in a community manager to really be building that relationship, and not just advertising, but bringing all of those insights back into the community or back into the company, right? As well as, working on sharing the love and word of mouth and what have you. So I am very thankful to Facebook, and I'm sure there are a lot of brands and people like, what are you saying? And you know what? You got to roll up your sleeves and do the dirty work, which is not dirty work. It's amazing, of building relationships with people.
Right. And I've got this voice in my head. You said you should have been doing it all along. And I said, oh, there's a shoulda. And it's purposeful right here and useful. And then this little voice in my head says, hey, we don't should all over ourselves. Right. And in this case, yeah, maybe take the fact that we might have egg on our face, get it wiped off and keep going. Recognize.
And you know what? Fair enough. Like small businesses, it's tough, but I think you do it the right way. There are a ton of people out there, Ivana, DIY marketers, physical chat, all of the people running chats, they're out there every day connecting and talking to people. And that's the best thing that brands can do. And I truly believe that all of that love is just going to trump all of the paid, because at some point, people get it too. They want relationships. That's why they're out there on these channels, and it just benefits the business. The business won't benefit just from acquisition if once they land there, there's nobody doing anything or showing anything or talking to anyone, right? So it's kind of a bleed of, unless you have a ton of money to throw out there. But I think that there's strategically, I think there's a better way to invest the money, and it's in the people.
We have another question. Yes, we have another question. We don't have time for it. So I will post it in the feeds on YouTube and on Facebook. And tag you so that you can answer that question. And I will share it here so everybody knows an answer is coming. And that is, how can we maintain a healthy balance using tech in an optimal way when we communicate with our community and even our colleagues online? So that's something will be a TBD, some sort of an answer will appear at some point in time around that. We have time for one more question, and it is the question of the program. Why is it bold, Kelly? Why is it bold to cultivate community? And it's okay if it's a repeat, because I think your last answer to the last thing was really part of it.
We need to invest in the people who matter most to us and the ones who love us most. It's put the money in the people. The paid media can come later. It can be a compliment, but invest your time in the people who love you most. Ta-da! That's it.
And here you have it. Nice, short, concise. I would expect
that came from
all of that from you. I do expect all of that from you. Oh, no. You see why we have Kelly come back to talk with us about marketing, about community, and about the things that allow us to use this technology to really build, to create this glue, to create this sense of community and understand who do we serve and how well are we serving them. And it shows up in different ways back to us. So we've got to change what we think our expectation is. And we've got to change the way, and I say we've got to. Well, you guess you don't have to if you don't want to, if you want to keep getting the same results. So I'm talking to all of us who want to up level, to take it to the next place and see the results and the community and the effort and what we have to share and the relationships that we are building and the people that we are bringing together being successful for us. You will find all of the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P121. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 121. You can also search the Voice of Bold Business website for Brands Can Cultivate Community. Kelly shared her time, her energy, her knowledge with us. And the notes that I have here are pretty insane. And in fact, this is only the first page of notes for those of you who are peeking in on video of what it is and where it's going and what we can use as we move forward. Email radio@Red Direction and share your comments, ideas, and feedback about the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and listen where all podcasts are sold. You, leaders today, define what it means for us to show up and what we do and what makes business successful. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to keep doing what you're doing? Are you going to face the adversity? Are you going to come up with ideas that you can do on the side? Because that's what leaders do. So any position, any place, you've got it in you. Tell us your story. And we want to know what your brand does and what your brand might need to cultivate community.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.